Well, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction. Let me share my screen. Is that working correctly? Can everyone see it? Looks good to you?
You got it up there. Looks beautiful.
All right, perfect. Thanks for joining me today. Everything that you said about me is true, but it's not about me, it's about you. So let me start by asking you this question, right? Why are you here today? Why are you? I don't mean like why are any of us here? Why does life exist? But I mean like why are you here attending this webinar right now, Monday morning? You are here. Why are you here? Right? And I ask this question because if we could figure out why you took an action, if you could figure that out for yourself, maybe you could figure out how you could get customers to take more actions, right? Because that's essentially what you did. You took an action, right? We would in marketing, we use this word conversion. Some of you might know it, some of you might not, but essentially it's asking a customer to do something, right? So for your customers, you might want to ask them to buy a product, but before that, you might want to ask them to attend a webinar. You might want to ask them to sign up for email. You might want to ask them to do a lot of things, right? And a decision point happens there. So for you, at some point, maybe you got an email from SCORE, or maybe someone told you about this and you clicked and you signed up at a link, right? But you didn't only do that. You didn't only like 1 or 2 or 3 weeks ago sign up for a link. Then you came back and you actually attended today. So why did you do it? Right? That's the answer I am essentially going to help you answer today. Because again, if you can figure that out, you can figure out how to do the same thing with your customers, get them to act. So I'd say at a high level, let's overly simplify it at first, and then we'll dig a little deeper, right? The reason that I would say you're here today, the reason that any customer, any person does anything is you perceived that the value was higher than the cost. Seems obvious when I say it, right? But sometimes we get into all the complexity of marketing or technology or sales or all these things, our own self-interest, and we forget this, right? The value has to be higher than the cost, and not the value itself and the cost itself, the perceived value. You didn't know the value of this webinar before you signed up, and your customers don't know the value of your offerings or whatever you're asking them to do before you sign up, right? It's that perception. So you're creating real value in the world, working hard as an entrepreneur, whatever you work on. How can we help you get your customers to perceive that value higher than the perceived cost? And now you might say, hey, I actually didn't pay any money today. I'm not exactly sure how SCORE works. I don't think you're paying for this webinar, but I'm not paying any money today to be here. I'm here because it's free. I would say no. As the saying goes, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Nothing in life is free. There's tons of free things you could be doing every day that you don't do because they still have a cost. You are paying me right now with an hour of your time. That is a high cost, right? Might not be monetary, but it's a high cost. So what I have to do today for you right here on this webinar is deliver more value to you than that cost, than that hour of your time. And here's one way we're going to do it, okay? We have this rarest of rare things these days. We are in the same place at the same time, right? I have 74 slides I've brought today. I want to try to bring you a lot of value because, again, I got to deliver more value than cost. I would be fine if I present like almost none of them and mostly just help you. So the way you can do that is you can ask questions. As you mentioned, use the Q&A feature. If he sees you have a question, he's going to raise his hand. I want to answer as many of your questions as I can today because I want you to leave today getting some value, more value than you paid with your hour of your time, right? And I want you to leave with an idea that you can use when you plan for 2025, maybe this week even, right? That was what success will look like. So use that Q&A feature, ask your questions. Again, I want to remind you, because I feel like you can get distracted by video, you can get distracted by your phone, all these things going on right now. You're not watching a video on replay, right? Right? All this content exists. If anyone's interested, they want more information, I can send you the slides. I can send you deeper articles we did with all the content I'm about to present with you today, right? We're in the same place at the same time. I'm in Jacksonville. Maybe you are too, or somewhere else in Florida, but at least metaphysically through this weird device that we have, these weird computers, we're in the same place at the same time and we can interact. So ask your questions, please. I'll answer as many as I can as possible. I'm here to serve you right now, not to present a bunch of slides. And here's what I'm going to be teaching you today. Again, it seems easy. Value is higher than cost. The perceived value is higher than cost. How do we do that? Well, we have a patented methodology that we broke down. You see at the bottom of the screen, it looks like a math formula. You might say I'm not a math person. I did not think there was going to be accounting today. I don't know accounting either. I'm going to break it down for you. This is what's called a heuristic. It's a thought tool. We're going to go through it step by step, and you're going to get ideas for getting more people to say yes to your offers. But first, let me just mention, this is who I am. You introduced me. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. There's my email address. The things I know not just from doing them myself, which I have some, but working at Marketing Sherpa, hosting the How I Made It Marketing podcast, coaching people how to build their funnel in the AI Guild. I've learned it from interviewing hundreds, probably over 1,000 marketers. So I have that background experience. I've all these case studies from all these marketers I've talked to. There's probably one relevant for you if you need any help. This is the organization I work for, MeclabsAI. It's the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa, which you might have heard of. What you're about to see, the methodology, comes from 10,000 marketing experiments that MeclabsAI has conducted since the turn of the century. This is a patented methodology, comes from all this experimentation. Okay, now that you understand why you should pay attention to stuff, why it matters, let's get into it. This is the Meclabs Conversion Sequence heuristic. You can see on your screen, here are the different elements that we're going to unpack. But first, I wanted to ask you a question. And then he said I could ask him this question about it. When I talk about this, I talk about why do we want a marketing methodology, right? Why do we need a methodology? And I would say because of all my time in this industry, especially even before I came to, MeclabsAI here, right? The thing I know, and I've been here 15 years, I've been here a while. The thing I noticed is in sales and in marketing, what we tend to defer to is there's that person with the golden gut, right? There's that good sales rep, that's a good sales leader. There's a copywriter, that marketer person, they've got the golden gut, and some people don't, right? And we just feel like it's, oh, that's certain, I don't know, it's this innate thing or some certain training. Some people get it and some people don't. And so what do we get, right? We get this lumpy performance. Yeah, we try to get that high performing sales rep to train the others, but that person's not a trainer. They're a good salesperson, right? So we get this lumpy performance of some people just get the marketing and sales and some people don't. But I say, in business, this isn't allowed in other areas of business. Why would we allow it in marketing and sales? So for example, I live very close to, right here in Jacksonville, to the Johnson & Johnson Vistakon contact lens manufacturing plant, right? And how do they manufacture their contacts? They don't go by, oh, there's a high-performing sales rep, there's a high-performing marketer, that one has a golden gut, right? Oh, on the assembly line today, oh, Fred is really good. We're going to get good contacts today. Oh, no, tomorrow we got Carl. Carl doesn't make that great of contacts. No, right? They have a methodology. They have a repeatable methodology that they follow each time to get a high-performing result. And that's why I'm going to teach you this methodology today. And you, if you're still there, I know we were talking before this call that you worked in manufacturing. Like, what has been your experience from this of having a methodology for manufacturing?
As I was telling you earlier, I worked for a food condiment company, RT French, and truly, we were regulated by the USDA. USDA had various requirements that we had to test for to make sure that we maintained at least minimum, if not better than that. The company itself actually had its own standards, which actually in quite a few cases were more stringent than USDA. And basically, statistical analysis of everything from raw material all the way through finished goods. Why? In order to go ahead and maintain the high level of quality that we believe was necessary to protect not only our customers, but also ourselves. So yes, we didn't rely on, who was good or who was bad. We looked at actual statistical data to determine, whether or not our product was meeting specifications.
That's it. And that's what I want for you, for your sales and marketing, high level of quality consistently each time, always good mustard. We're going to get you always good mustard. So let's unpack this methodology. And I want you to use it every time you're trying to get a conversion, which again is just a marketing term to get someone to act, get someone to do something, right? And that's where we're going to start, right? So if you look at this, C equals 4M, it all starts with there. It starts with the conversion. And so what we're trying to do when, as you mentioned too, with this statistical analysis, it's about probabilities. We can never guarantee a conversion, right? But what we can do is increase the probability of that conversion. So how do we do that, right? Let's start with getting the right ask to begin with, right? Customer first marketing. You can increase the probability of conversion by asking the customer to do something that is in their best interest, right? A lot, and I mention this because this is really hard. It's harder than it sounds because we have this big giant blind spot. And this giant blind spot is we got to pay the mortgage. We got to make sales. We got to meet payroll, right? So we got to sell products. We got to do these things that are in our interest. And sometimes when we're so focused on, we got to hit our numbers this year, we got to get those sales in, we got to get those leads in, we overlook what is in the best interest of our customers. But again, that's why they're going to act, right? You didn't come here today because I have certain goals and you're like, hey, this Daniel Burstein, I read about him, he seems like a nice guy. Let me go to his webinar to help him meet his goals, right? You came here today to help meet your goals. So I talk about this when I talk about our conversion heuristic. I've also communicated it this way, right? Typically, we show C equals 4M plus 3B stacked, right? The different levels of marketing maturity, if we talk about it this way. The highest level is customer first marketing. I'm going to walk through all these. At the bottom is just marketing with incentives, right? We're going to talk about that. Next is having good usability, removing friction, anxiety. We're going to talk about that. Up from there is having a clear value proposition, a powerful value proposition. Up from there is understanding the motivation of the user. We're going to talk about all that. But I want you to remember the highest thing is asking the right thing to begin with. You will get more customers to say yes if you ask something that is in their best interest, right? And don't take it from me. We've done research on this. We've done studies. So right here, what you're seeing is some data where we interviewed 2,400 different customers from across the country with Nielsen. I mean, not an interview, like a survey. And we split them into two groups. It was representative samples, so different ages, genders, all that stuff. And we split them into two groups. And we said for half of them, for 1,200, we said, tell us about a company that you had a positive experience with that you liked. And the other half, we said, tell us about a company that you had a negative experience with that you don't like. And then we asked them a series of questions, right? And as you would expect, if people were satisfied with the company, they would be more likely to do a lot of things. For example, you can see there's a 713% difference if they'd be very likely to continue purchasing products and services from a company, right? That's so, again, not shocking that people would be more likely or very likely to continue purchasing products and services if they were satisfied. That is, shouldn't surprise you. But the size of the difference, a 713% difference, right? Which then naturally leads to the question, well, how do we get these satisfied customers? And so when we asked them the difference between the satisfied and unsatisfied customers, one of the biggest differences was this element of being customer first, right? The satisfied customer, I mean, at number one, you can see was for satisfied customers, I have it grayed out, but I consistently have good experiences with the company, right? Obviously, that's going to lead people to be satisfied. This goes beyond your marketing. That's everything a good company should do. Obviously, do that. But when you look at the biggest differentiators, it doesn't always try to sell me, but provides value for satisfied customers, right? You hear that? Doesn't always try to sell me, provides value. How can you do that with your marketing? Let's talk about that today, right? Versus unsatisfied customers, the company always tries to sell me instead of providing value, right? And even number one on there, which I have grayed out for unsatisfied customers, the company does not put my needs and wants above its own business goals. And you felt that as a customer, right? You felt that. Right? This is the way I explain it too, just in my personal life, right? You naturally will be more forgiving and will like more a company or individual when you think they have your best interests at heart, right? So for example, I am married, okay? And if my wife asks me to take out the garbage and I don't take out the garbage, right? And we're not doing so well at the time, right? We're not doing so well in our marriage. She doesn't just think, oh, he didn't take out the garbage. She thinks, oh, he didn't take out the garbage because he doesn't care about me. And, he didn't do all those other things. He didn't pick up the food the other day, right? Right. It's not just the action I didn't do, take out the garbage. It's what's his motivations? He doesn't really care about me. Versus if we're doing pretty well, I don't take out the garbage. It's like, oh, he didn't take out the garbage. He's busy. He's been working a lot, right? It doesn't become he didn't take out the garbage. He doesn't care about me. It's he didn't do that action. And the same is true with your customers, right? When something goes wrong with your product or service, you don't want them to think like, well, it went wrong because they don't care about me as a customer. They don't care about customers in general. They just care about their bottom line. You want them to feel like, hey, this company has been out, they've been helpful to me. Something went wrong. Well, technology snafus happen. This happens, that happens, right? And I'm sure when you think about the customer, the companies you've done business with, it's the same thing, right? Sometimes companies do something wrong, you're more forgiving. And sometimes companies do something wrong and you are so upset, right? Right. And that goes beyond just marketing. It's customer first business, right? How do you feel the company prioritizes your needs as a customer against its own business goals? You can see the satisfied customers, they feel like they are being prioritized. So how do you do that? We use something called a customer first objective. So I'm not showing you our Meclabs AI today because, SCORE is very big on don't show products and stuff. I'm really trying not to do that. I'm just trying to show things that are helpful. But a lot of the things I'm going to tell you about, they're baked into Meclabs AI. Meclabs AI helps you do these things. So you can do this as a human being and plot this stuff out. But AI is very helpful in doing this as well. So basically, if you want to build a customer first objective, right, before you're putting that offer out there, you want to answer these three questions, right? It should be to help by giving in exchange for. So one, how will you help the customer, right? So in this example I pulled up, This was an example actually from a real company in the AI Guild. I anonymized it because I didn't want to, use their private information, but this is what someone actually built, right? How will you help the customer to help administrators in hospital networks? So in this case, right, it starts with a very good understanding of who the customer is as administrators in hospital networks. What will you give the customer by sharing? And then again, it's saying what they're sharing. They're not just trying to sell something, right? Because that was their goal with this company originally too. They just had a landing page that was trying to get leads for their service, but instead they're going to give insights into commonly identified areas within hospital operations that are resulting in negative financial impacts, right? So they're giving them some information, that potential customer, to help them do their job better, right? And they're doing that whether this potential customer buys from them or not, right? Their goal is to help the potential customer, not just to get them as a lead. And then in exchange for, what will you ask for in return, right? Again, it's not asking, buy my product, even though that's the thing we want in the moment. At this point, they're just asking for the time to review the case study and provide 5 pieces of information needed to tailor the report plus their email address, right? So again, you're essentially getting what we would call a lead. You're getting some information from that potential customer that then you can build a relationship with them and over time lead them to the natural conclusion that they would want to buy from you if that's the right decision for them. All right, so let me show you what this would mean in real world scenario. This is a case study. I interviewed, this was the winner. We had a big MarketingSherpa summit. We used to have it before the COVID days in the Aria in Las Vegas. We'd have 1,000 attendees. And this was one of our winners of Best in Show. It's a company called HCSS. They are a construction company, construction software company. So they make software for the construction industry. I interviewed Dan Briscoe, the VP of marketing there. You can see his quote on the slide. I won't read it to you. But the biggest thing I loved about what they did, and you can see, they got a 53% increase in conversion from it. 53% increase in revenue. That was a conversion. 53% increase in revenue. Wow, that's a big increase, right? And the main thing they did was they had their regular lead generation going on like a lot of other companies did, but they asked, what is a main challenge or pain point that our customer has, our ideal customer? What is the main challenge or pain point they had, right? They went down that road and they found out, one of the main challenges they have is hiring. We're not getting enough people coming into our industry to hire into, the building and construction industry. And so then they said, how can we help them? And they came up with this idea to build this community called I Build America, right? And you can see some of it here. And it was all about recruiting new people to come into work in the construction and building industry, right? They came up with hats and tchotchkes, and they ran campaigns, and they had a whole community around it, right? And the key thing here is, this is not what they sold, okay? They were not an HR recruiting company, okay? They were a construction software company that helped you manage your construction projects. They did not sell this, but they did this because they realized this was a top challenge our customers have. Let's help them. So then what came from this is, right, construction software companies were seeing this and they loved it. This is what they needed. They wanted to get involved. And so one thing Dan told me, he's like, we got into conversations that were way above our pay grade. We were punching way above our weight that we would have never gotten into with, going up against major, much bigger companies that were our competitors, right? Because our ideal customers saw what we were doing in the industry and they wanted to be a part of it and they loved it and they learned about us and they saw how we acted and they wanted to get involved. So think about this. What is the I Build America in your industry, right? I'm going to give you some questions to help you come up with the right answer for your industry, right? Here's 3. What is the principal need or challenge your ideal customers are facing, right? So just, again, if you can, step back for 1 minute from whatever your goal is now for the rest of the year, for your 2025 goals, to sell, to get leads, whatever it is. Step back. Let's just step back from thinking about ourselves for a minute. Just think about your ideal customer. What is their main challenge, right? Then determine the value proposition. We're going to get into value proposition for your company you're offering, but what unique value can you bring to helping them solve this challenge, right? Outside of your direct product sale. If you didn't sell anything, if you weren't just trying to sell to them, if you help them no matter what would your value proposition be for that? And then finally, what would be a metric of success, right? How can you measure this objective's impact on customer satisfaction, on business outcomes? Right? So think about that. That's one, the first thing. You've got probably different offers in the field right now. You're selling products, you're getting leads, you're doing different things. If you're going to launch a new offer before the end of the year, if you're going to launch a new offer in 2025, right? Get with your team, get with whoever key people are, and figure out how you can help people. So I'm going to move on to the next step now, motivation. But first, I see we have a question.
Would these methods work with B2B or B2C? Would there be any change between them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in this example right here, this is a B2B example. I mean, really the main difference in B2B and B2C in using these methods is understanding that in B2B, it's probably a more complex organization. So for example, with software companies I worked in the past, they would have this set up for different roles, right? So you would understand not just the ideal customer as a purchaser, you would understand who is the purchaser, who is an influencer, like what are the different people involved in making that decision and how can you serve them and what different goals do they have? So for example, we would have like exec to exec. That would be the business leaders. What are their challenges? How are you going to serve them, right? We'd also have IT to IT because those are like, the software developers, the IT folks. How are you going to serve them? And so understanding those different customers in your organization for a B2B organization is a little more challenging because once you get down, at first you could start at the company level, but if you're doing this really well and answering these questions really well, you're answering them for those different both purchasers and influencers in your organization, which can be very different depending on the type of sale you're doing, right? At the B2C level, I like to say, and this is kind of true for B2B as well, it's understanding there's just probably one of two things, right? If we're going to break it down, people are either trying to overcome a pain point or they're trying to meet a goal, right? In their life, usually, right? And so it's starting with what is that pain point or goal? I like to say it like if you remember the classic song from around World War II, we want to accentuate the positive or eliminate the negative. Breaking this down, how are you going to accentuate the positive or eliminate the negative for that person? Also, it's understanding, and this is actually, I'll kind of segue into our next the next element is the motivations, understanding the motivation. So how the motivations are different. So for one, the motivation in B2B, there's probably those two different levels. It's one, how will the organization help, how will I help the organization meet its goals? But how will I help that individual meet its goals? And sometimes helping the individual meet its goals, for example, is that individual like not getting fired if something goes wrong, right? So earlier in my career, I was a contractor at IBM, and there was a famous saying for IBM is no one ever got fired for buying IBM, right? So if you're a smaller company going against IBM, that's a thought too of like, okay, it's not just how am I helping the organization meet its goals, is how am I helping that individual person in their career meet their goals? And that could just be not getting fired if something goes wrong, right? Or getting a promotion or whatever it is. For the individual, B2C, sometimes when you're tapping into those motivations, it's not just the logical, right? But it's also the emotional. So I'll give you an example. I worked in high-end real estate early in my career. And so, for example, in like Bachelor Gulch Village, Beaver Creek, up there, these second, third, fourth home ski in, ski out condos, right? And so when we're selling these, you got to realize they weren't built yet. It's just a mountain with some snow. And so the brochures were essential. We'd make these really high quality brochures. We'd super invest in these brochures. And there's two reasons, right? There was kind of the logical. There was like, okay, you can't see the fit and finish of this, building you're about to buy, but you've got that brochure. It's got a high level of fit and finish. Okay, like I logically feel like this is gonna, be something I'd like to buy. But then there was the emotional next level. Why were a lot of people really buying these condos? It was because there was the great, this time of year is perfect. There was the great battle for the grandkids, right? So this time of year, the grandkids are either probably coming with you or coming with the other in-laws. And so then you'd have this great brochure, and then they could take it and show their kids and say, hey, why don't you join us next Christmas or Hanukkah? We're going to have this great ski and scout place, come and join us. So again, it's understanding those motivations, which I'm about to get into. But I think we might have one more question.
Yes. So measuring the impact is measuring performance towards the objective on your own organization, not the results for the client.
Well, it's so the important thing is understanding that at two levels, right? Because the client or the customer's results come before your own. So when we look at this example, that first level of metrics they had to understand is, are we getting potential people who would want to work in the construction industry to join our community and to join the construction industry, right? That was level one, right? So once we're doing that, Then we're seeing like, okay, we've created this community. It's not going to be instant results from a strategy like this. You got to understand, you can't end after the first quarter. But then are we getting companies that want to work with us because we've built this community? So it's at those two levels. But if you're not helping the customer with anything, then you're not ultimately achieving your own goals either. So let's talk about motivation now. So motivation on the prospect, you'll notice that motivation has the highest number on the heuristic, the 4. That's because of all of these different things you can tweak, motivation is going to have the biggest impact whether people say yes or no. I also want to mention that this is hard work. When you see that formula, it's not tricks, it's not hacks, right? So one example I did to kind of figure out like, okay, how can I talk to people? How can I tell them, should I use tricks and hacks to solve my marketing problems? I'm sure this time of year, really all year long, there's plenty of things you can find on LinkedIn, on social media and email. Everyone's got the tricks and hacks and shortcuts to give you results. I don't know any shortcuts. From what I've seen, like you got to put in the deep thinking. That's the biggest thing I'm trying to teach you today. It's not like just getting that perfect Facebook ad. It's that deep thinking to have the right strategy to begin with. So one thing I did to try to figure out how can I communicate to you guys about this. I don't know if anyone's aware of Marcus Aurelius, Stoicism. This is something that's kind of been trending a little lately. It's thousands of years old. And I really like kind of the Stoic philosophy. So I quickly built an expert in MeclabsAI. I took Marcus Aurelius's book. I uploaded it in Meditations. I uploaded it into it's copyright free. I wouldn't do this with something copyrighted, right? It's thousands of years old. I uploaded it into MeclabsAI. And so I wanted to get some ancient wisdom that I could bring you. And I said, should I use tricks and hacks to solve my marketing problems? You can see the full response there. But I liked one of the things that Marcus Aurelius had said in Meditations originally, that which is an obstacle on the road helps us on the road, right? So keep that in mind when you see this. Yeah, it looks complex. It looks difficult. And you're like, man, I want to just go to the guy. I'm going to go on LinkedIn after this. Someone's got a shortcut on what I can do with my Facebook ads. I'm going to do that. I would argue like part of going through this is not having the answer right away. Part of going through this is wrestling with it. And it's a perfect time of year for it. It's the end of the year. Hopefully get a little time off, a little time to think. New Year's is coming. New Year's resolutions is a time of year people reflect. The whole point of this heuristic is not to have an instant answer. It's to wrestle with it. So let's talk about an example of motivation. Here's an experiment we ran at Meclabs with a client. It was a medical provider that specialized in innovative chronic back pain treatment. Here is an ad they were running. This is like a Google PPC ad, relief from back pain. Right, makes sense. Back pain treatment. This is an ad you might run. But here's the things we want to ask, and here's the things you should ask too. How can you amplify the felt gap between what they have and what they desire? And how can we incite the prospect to want more, right? So we tested something. We played around. There's different experiments we ran. I'm not going to show you each and every PPC ad we ran, but here's the difference. Avoid open back surgery, right? So think about it. Someone, their back's hurting, right? We talked about there's two things. You can either help them meet a goal, help them overcome a pain point. In that case, it is a pain point. But what do they most want, right? Do they want relief from back pain? Well, yes, that's maybe the obvious. That's the level one. But underneath that, what do they really want? What is their deep motivation that we could tap into? Because think about it, they're probably going to a lot of websites that are saying, we can relieve your back pain with pills, with exercises, with chiropractors, with all sorts of things, right? Avoid open back surgery. Wow, so you can get relief from back pain. And maybe that's the thing that you're most scared of. Your pain is the actual back pain, but you're most scared of that open back surgery, right? And boom, there was a 46% increase, in conversion from that, right? Or another example is single micro incision, right? Avoid open back surgery. So it's understanding when you're talking about the customer's motivations, really tapping into what are they really motivated by, right? Both of those ads kind of said the same thing. They were going for the same product, right? It was the same real value being delivered, but that's where the perceived value is so important. And sometimes changing those words, just a few words, makes a big difference. So here are some questions that can help you do that, but I see we have another question that I want to address first before we get into these.
In your equation, you utilize the numbers 4, 3, 2. What do the numbers represent?
Yeah, perfect. I'll answer that in just 1 second because I'm going to show that equation in just 1 second. But first, let me show you these questions that can help you tap into the motivation. This is something you think, where's the customer in the thought sequence, right? So customers, they go along a journey before they purchase your product, right? If you think of that journey as from all the way over here to I don't even know your company or product, or maybe this category exists, to this is the right company and product and category for me. Where are they along that thought sequence, right? Something that can help you know is, where is that traffic coming from? Are these repeat visitors? Are these first time visitors, right? How well do they know you? So then when you think about that entire spectrum, what conclusions do they need to make before buying, right? You can map that out, these different conclusions they need to make. What are their pain points and what do they value, right? Like we talked about. And by answering these types of questions, your analytics is a great place to look, but also actually talking to customers, previous customers, those that don't purchase, looking in forums. I love forums and review sites, and trying to map this out. And this is what you're experimenting with, like we did in those PPC ads I showed you, trying to figure out what most motivates your customers. All right, now let me answer that question. What do these numbers stand for? As we look at value proposition, these numbers are relative, right? So the point of the numbers, this isn't an equation that you're trying to solve. It's called a heuristic, right? It's a thought tool. It's helping you. It's a methodology that you can put up. And for example, right before COVID, we were at this major bank in Toronto doing a training, and the head of marketing there and all his team talked about how they had this up in their cubicles, right? And this was before, I mean, I'm working at home now. A lot of people work at home, but you could have it in your home office. They had this in their cubicles. And before they put any offer live, any marketing live, they went through and they looked at this and they made sure they were thinking this through, right? You can print this out. We used to do cards with it. And the goal of those numbers is, that is the relative importance of each of these elements as it relates to the probability of conversion. So as I mentioned, 4M, motivation, that the highest and most important thing you can do is tap into motivation, right? That's the highest and most important thing you can do. So I'll give you an example. Like, I am what you would call follically challenged, right? I don't have hair on the top of my head. So if there was some bald cure being offered, like, I am highly motivated to get interest to learn about that balding cure, right? I'd be less motivated with other things. Now, you need more than just to have motivation, but the best thing you can do is tap into that motivation. That's something within the customer. Understand that motivation and tap into it. Next is value proposition, right? That's the second most important thing. And then you'll see the numbers too. So again, that's the relative importance. If you could just do one thing, understand and tap into that motivation, that's going to have the biggest impact. But next up is value proposition. This is something you can actually affect. The good folks at SCORE, they always said, hey, we don't want just stuff from you. We want to see, where did some of this information come from? So when it comes to our value proposition methodology, I'm going to go through some of these slides real quick. I mean, you can see this isn't just from our organization. The great thinkers in marketing and advertising over the past 120 years have talked about value proposition. Here are some of the different books we went through when we came up with this methodology, in addition to our own experimentation. You can see we looked through the entire history of value proposition. I'm not going to get deep into it, but I'm sure you'll get the slides later if you want to get deeper. We talked to, we looked at the, different literature from key academics to see what they were saying. We even had a big roundtable, one of our big events in Las Vegas, to figure out, what these different experts in the field were saying. And here's what we landed on. This is really, so you boil all that down, what does it matter to you, right? When it comes to your value proposition, here's a question you want to answer. If I am your ideal prospect, why should I buy from you rather than any of your competitors, right? So let's unpack that. If I am your ideal prospect, right? It's a first person question. So you need to answer with because, right? Someone's actually asking that of you. You need to answer with because, and that kind of gets you going into your answer, right? Your ideal prospect. You need a specific customer segment. This is the biggest challenge I see a lot of companies have all the time. In the AI Guild, coaching some consulting clients, some people with consulting businesses, small consulting businesses, and the way they were presenting their offer in their ads made it look like they were competitors to McKinsey and Accenture and all the big consulting firms, right? Who is your ideal prospect? Who is that specific customer segment? That necessitates a trade-off. Who are you not best at serving? Because the more you can tailor and narrow that down, the more you can tap into their specific motivations, and the more you can have an effective value proposition, right? Why should you got to give them a reason? That helps you understand what is the ultimate reason they have for taking this action that I'm asking. And rather than your competitors. This is a mistake I see too. I remember earlier in my career, before I knew better, I was working with one of those electric health records. I think it was called EHR. It was a big trending thing. And at the time, I took some stock instead of taking pay because it seemed like, oh, this big trending thing that happened. And the big mistake I made is I didn't realize How many of these electronic health records things were out there, right? So when you hear just what this one company that was working with did, it sounded amazing. I didn't realize this was pretty common through hundreds of thousands of companies at the time in the marketplace. They didn't have an only factor. Understanding what your competitors are doing and the only factor is key to an effective value proposition. So what does it take to have an effective value proposition? Let's break it down. You need appeal. I want it, right? It needs to be something that the customer actually wants. You need to tap into the thing they most want. That gets into some of the motivation things we were talking about. Do you really understand what they want, and are you tapping into that, right? Exclusivity. I can't get it anywhere else. That's that only factor, comparing to competitors. So if you have that appealing thing they want, and they get it 10 other places and 10 tabs are open, they're probably going to go with the lowest cost, right? Or you might just get lucky and they go with you sometimes, right? Clarity. I understand it. This, when we talk about the difference between B2B and B2C, and especially for any complex product, this is sometimes a problem. Like, look at many B2B websites. It's not even clear what they do or what they offer. And they all sound alike, right? It's scalable, right? Everything is scalable, right? SaaS, software as a service, like all of these different things. A lot of the companies are saying the same thing. They don't understand what you're really getting for it, right? And lastly, this is the biggest thing I see overlooked so many times. There's the credibility, right? Do they actually believe it? What can you have on there to make your offer credible that they actually believe it? I've seen, and I'm sure you have too, so many different companies make so many different claims, and you can make any claim you want in the world, but if customers are not going to believe it, they're not going to act. So let's look at another experiment. This is an experiment at Meclabs that we ran with a database marketing solutions company that went to the SMBs. And you can see here was the original control, right? Is there a value proposition on this page? Right? Searching for the most accurate mailing list. Your hunt is over. Get 500 free leads today with qualified purchase. That's incentive. We're going to talk about incentive, the 500 free leads. But what do you see on here that's different than any other database company? Couldn't any database company have that headline? Right? So what we did is we call this buried gold, right? We didn't change any of the actual value they were delivering. We just wanted to better communicate the perceived value. And we saw on the page that they offered, it was buried there. Most people were probably closing it before they even saw it. We make more than 26 million calls each year to verify and enhance our business database. That's a value proposition, right? This is what it would actually look like. Why should I buy from you? You know, the question we just talked about. Because we have the most comprehensive and accurate lead database. That would be a value proposition that's appealing. But again, then you need credibility, because everyone could say that, right? Well, what's the credibility? We looked at that, 26 million number. We unpacked it. We worked with the company, figure out what they were actually doing. And you can see all these numbers. That adds credibility, that they were actually making sure it was comprehensive and accurate, right? So let's see what this looked like on a page. Look at that change. We make 26 million phone calls a year to ensure you get the most accurate mailing list available. No one else can make that claim. It's credible, right? It has all the different true information about what they were doing. Again, they were already doing this. This was hidden value. This was buried gold. No customer was perceiving it because they weren't communicating it. What are you doing in your company that is delivering value that is not being communicated through your marketing, through your sales, that customers aren't perceiving? There's some low-hanging fruit there. There's buried gold that you could deliver on, right? Look at it side by side, and boom, 200%, 201% relative increase in lead capture rate, right? And I hope you can see why. And I hope that gives you an idea for your own company. But I also want to mention, when we talk about value proposition, I know with SCORE, we tend to have more of the small business leaders. So you can actually influence the core value proposition for your company, for your product, but sometimes, in big companies, marketers tell us, well, I can't influence the overall value proposition, right? So I want you to understand there's different levels of value proposition. Now, this is true for the small business too, because you're not going to put your overall value proposition everywhere, right? So there is a prospect level value proposition, right? If you're a big enough company, you might have different types of customers, and that value proposition, like with motivation, should tie into those specific customers. Right? You might have a product level value proposition. There's different products, they'll have different value propositions that tie into your overall value proposition. And lastly, a process level value proposition, right? So for example, like you're here today, getting people to attend a webinar, there's a process level value proposition for that, right? The value proposition communicated wasn't the overall, like if you look at the title and description I wrote up, it wasn't the value proposition for MarketingSherpa or MeclabsAI, right? It wasn't that overall value proposition. It was the process level value proposition for attending the webinar today. So think about the different asks you're making at different levels and what type of value proposition you need to tie into it. You don't always use your core value proposition. Now, the things we've talked about so far were how we can increase perceived value. Next, we're going to talk about how we can decrease perceived cost. I've got some free things I want to tell you about, but I think we might have a question.
We do. If you have people coming from different areas that have different motivations, what is the process or method for applying this content motivators on the same web page?
Yeah, well, so there's two different things that you can do, right? One, let's talk about the ideal. The ideal would be you would have landing pages that would be tied specifically to those different motivations, right? Different campaigns sending to specific landing pages to those different motivations. If you can't do that, that was the ideal thing to do. There's two other things you do. One, try to find the commonality of those motivations and then try to drive people to the right thing for them. Even if you can't do that, then again, it's trying to communicate that all on the same page. So it goes from the ideal having individual landing pages to getting like, okay, what are the commonalities that I can communicate on the page? There's another question?
That's it. Good.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, so what we talked about so far was ways that we can increase the perceived value. Next, I'm going to talk about ways we can decrease perceived cost. But first, I want to mention, again, we only have an hour today. There's a lot you can go deeper into it. We've got a ton of free resources. You go to Marketing Sherpa. We've got lots of free case studies and data articles. How I Made It in Marketing is a free podcast with career lessons and stories. Become a Marketer Philosopher, Create and Optimize High Converting Web Pages, a free digital marketing course. I have the AI Guild. It's a group you can join, free 3-month scholarship. And on January 8th at, I said 3 p.m. Eastern, I think it might actually be noon Eastern, but you can go to that website, MeclabsAI.com/getproductive. You can sign up. Our CEO, Flint McLaughlin, he's a much better speaker than me. He'll be showing you how to like use AI to actually do some of these things and get more productive. Again, I think that's actually at noon Eastern, but that's January 8th in the new year. So you can go to MeclabsAI.com/getproductive and join us for that. All right, let's talk about now some of the perceived costs we're trying to decrease, right? And that's why you see the negative signs, the minus, right? Because these are things that are that are negative that we want to reduce. So one is anxiety. What is anxiety, right? We're going to talk about friction in a second. That's resistance. But anxiety is concern, right? What concerns might people have if they were going to act on your offer? What might they be thinking? So here's a great example, addressing anxiety, how to create a customer first offer. This was for a B2B VoIP company. And you could see they, on the original control form, they asked for a phone number and had a get quote button, right? When you see a phone number on there, what are people thinking right away? Oh, I'm going to get a sales call to try to sell me on this quote. We changed that, took out the phone number. We just put in the information we needed to actually just give them an instant quote. How many users, how many phone numbers you have, right? So that's what it comes from. This experiment we ran with this B2B VoIP company. I want to show you, there was more on the page that, we did as well, but I'm just trying to focus on kind of those anxiety elements at this time, right? Here's some of the different things in the, there's where the actual form went on the treatment, right? And let me just and like I said, we did some different things on the page. We're not going to get into all that, but I want to show you mostly the difference between the form. 262% increase, right? So again, we talked about specific concerns about the product. We talked about those different elements, right? They're going to have those anxieties as well. But for that form specifically, we're going to talk about that in a second. But for that form specifically, that anxiety you could see on the page still was asking for phone number and then waiting to get a quote. When the company didn't need to do that. That was a company-centric thing, right? Why did they do that? Probably because they said, oh, if we can get someone on a call, we're more likely to convert them, right? But what do people want? They don't want to go on sales calls. So that's a mistake I think a lot of companies make. They're like, when we get people on a call or in a demo, we'll convert them more. It's because you're only getting the highest motivated people, right? And you're losing all these other people who might convert, but you're putting that bar too high and raising anxiety too much. I saw a hand raised. Was there a question or?
We have two.
Okay, great.
How do you, yes, how do you build credibility in consulting for a service if you're just getting started?
Oh, that's a great question. I get that a lot. So I'm going to give you one example that was not, because I got this question recently in the AI Guild. I'll give you one example that's not from consulting, just to get your brain spinning, right? So the question you have to ask is, what is the honest promise you can make? So I did interview with a leader at a company called 21st Century Brands. I think I forget the exact company. They're well known branding consultancy, right? And she talked about working with BMW. I think this was in 2010. And it was when BMW was just starting to roll out its electronic cars. And the problem when they were starting to roll out their electronic cars, right, it wasn't like BMW level and worthy. There were lots of issues with them, right? They weren't going to go very far at first. They were going to have all issues with charging and stuff, right? So it's kind of similar to your consultant at first. How can I set up credibility? So what they didn't do is say, this is the ultimate driving machine like they did with a regular BMW. What they said is, hey, we're running this experiment, launching these BMWs, and we're looking for explorers. I think they called them like electrononauts or something like astronauts. We're looking for these explorers who want to be on the cutting edge and do this with us, right? And so they set up the problem. They said like, hey, this is experimental. What are we going to do? You know, how's this going to work? Like, be on the cutting edge, figure this out with us. Right. So, and it worked really well for them. And so so that's the first thing I say to anyone who's consulting, doesn't have a lot of experience. Don't come out there with the same credibility indicators you see the main consultants do. Come out there with an honest promise, right? And say, hey, you're going to be one of the lucky few that's going to be experimenting on this new service I'm offering, right? And because of that, you're going to get this big discount, or you're going to get 10 times more attention from me than you will from anyone else, right? So that's one thing, right? But then the second thing is look hard and fast at your business and say, and ask that question, why should someone trust me for this, right? So if you're new to consulting, if that's your consulting business is new, hopefully you have previous experience, right? You have because I did this in the past, you know, I'm consulting on soda manufacturing now. I used to work for Coca-Cola, whatever it is. Tie into that you as a person and your previous consulting experience. If in the worst possible world, you don't have any of that, then figure out how are you going to learn this stuff and do it really well and use that to communicate your credibility, right? No one is doing more background research on this than me. I'm taking 10 courses. I'm reading 100 publications every single day. So you might, you know, go with someone who's got 50 years experience, but I know the cutting edge stuff because, you know, because I do all this, you know, research right now, right? It's the great thing is that back to that great campaign, if anyone remembers the famous Avis campaign, Hertz was the #1 car company. So Avis didn't come out and say, we're even better. They said, we're #2. We work harder, right? And if you're just starting on consulting, you need some version of that credibility, not just saying that, look, I'm going to work harder for you, or I'm going to have a special offer, then get some specifics on it. What are you honestly going to do to make sure you can compete with the big consultants? We had another question?
Yes. How can we find the steps customer phase in the customer journey? What are the insights or KPIs to identify these steps?
Yeah. So one thing I share, and whoever that is, I can share this kind of blog post I've done before, and I can pull it up. So one thing we would do is we would do these value proposition workshops and quick win intensives. And we used to have a building by the Mayo Clinic, and then they bought it. So we don't have this anymore. Now we're remote, but we used to have these different screens where we pull up each screen, we pull up a step in the customer process, or we would just, you know, kind of write it out, print it out real big and write the customer process. So before you go to the kind of your analytics and talk to customer stuff, kind of first sit down. This is where you can intuit things and say, okay, what do we offer, and back it up. What are the different steps that someone would have to logically get to, right? You're setting up your hypothesis. Here's where I think it is, right? Or, you know, look at what you currently have. So that's if you have nothing. If you have something, look at what you currently have. Pull up the different screens. They're starting here. They're going here. They're going here. We set up these different steps. What actual questions are we trying to answer, right? So you've got that as your hypothesis. Now what you want to bounce off that hypothesis is, if you currently do have, you know, any sort of funnel set up, look at the metrics for that funnel, right? How many people are going from this step to this step to this step? If you have site search, it's a great thing to look at. If you have different ads, you can see what messages are actually pulling. And then down from there, you know, survey customers, talk to them on the phone. If you have enough customers, you talk to 5 or 10 of them, you start to see commonalities. Look in different forums when people are talking about this. If you've got like G2 or customer reviews, look at your customer reviews, right? And then you're setting that up. And then a lot of times it's just testing, right? You've got that set up. Now let's test, what does this ad work more? Does this ad? What pulls here? What, you know, next step do they need to take? So I've got a different blog post for that. If someone, you know, wants to follow up with me, I'll share that with them because it gets deeper, but that's kind of what you can do at a high level. But unless we have any more questions.
One just popped up, Yelp or Google for reviews slash ads.
Yeah, I mean, both Yelp and Google reviews are great. I mean, sometimes it depends on the product. If you're a B2B, sometimes there's like a specific platform for it. I mentioned G2. I interviewed the CMO of Trust Radius like a week or two ago. So it's understanding what is that forum where Reddit can be big. What is that forum where your customers are going to be talking about you? And then second, yeah, it's getting the data from ads, trying out different messages like I showed you with motivation, trying out the different messages and showing what's pulling.
Excellent. That's
Um,
it. Thank you.
all right, so anxiety real quick. So here are, and you need to kind of map these out for yourself, but this is just kind of help you brainstorm. What anxieties might your customers have about your product? I put some on there for this specific example. For example, how much is this really going to cost? You see it says only $20 a month per user, but we all know there's a hidden fees or it, right? What else is involved in that? You know what I mean? So that's about the product. You can see those there. Here's some about the process. For example, the one I showed before is what happens when I click get quote, right? You got a phone number and get quote. What anxiety is there and how can you do things to mitigate and reduce that anxiety? Not based on what you want, but what on the customer wants. Here's another negative element, another cost. Remember, cost isn't just money when we talk about perceived cost. It's these elements like anxiety and friction, right? Friction, so when we talked about anxiety as concern, friction is resistance. It's a difficult process. What is a process you're making people go through? We have a little separate heuristic for friction: length, time, and difficulty, right? Is it a long process? Is it a difficult process? These things will reduce conversion. So here's an example. There's a director of digital marketing for this company, Bacula Systems. They were at Google's SMX event in 2022. They saw a case study we did with, I think it was Marketo, I don't remember who. And you can see right there on the difference in form field length and the difference in conversion, right? So if there was 9 fields in the form, it cost $41.90 per lead. If it was 5 fields in the form, it cost $31.24. Right? So obviously a shorter form, less friction, more people are likely to fill it out. Now you might say, oh, but we have to have all these things in our form. We need a phone number and this and that. Let me show you an example where you really need to challenge a model. What do you really need in your form? What do you really need to ask? So this director of digital marketing, he went back to his form and he said, okay, I know we think we need all these things. What do we really need? And he found 2 forms he could reduce. So just reducing 2 forms, that reduces length-oriented friction. But also, they were difficult fields. So reducing those 2 fields, he reduced difficulty-oriented friction, right? So one of the fields was asking the number of virtual machines or clients that they wanted to protect, right? But what happens when you put that in a field on a forum? How many virtual machines do you want to protect for this company system? What happens is now they got to, at the very least, think, and they don't want to put in the wrong number, or maybe they got to go back to other people. So they don't fill out your form, they leave, they go talk to other people, they try to calculate it, 10 other things happen, they never go back, they buy from someone else, right? And he realized we don't really need to be asking these things yet. Remember, you don't need to get everything at first right up front. There is a journey you can go on with your customers. Deliver value, build trust, and you can do this over time versus creating a lot of friction, driving them away. So they reduced 2 fields. Again, one of them was just asking how many virtual machines. And what they got is the conversion rate increased from 2.4% to 3.44% with no additional budget spend, right? They're spending all that same money, driving all that traffic through, right? When in their ads, whatever they're doing, they didn't, no additional budget spend. They got more leads. And they saw too, you can see here, even shared all this specific data. The quality of the leads didn't go down, right? So think about that on your forms or just in your process. What are you asking? Can you make it simpler? Do you need all that friction up front? Can you ask over time, right? Now keep in mind, not all friction is bad. So I mentioned I have the How I Made It in Marketing podcast. So the way a lot of podcasts work is they reach out to people and they say, oh, will you be my guest? Will you be my guest? We don't do that. There's an application. Not only is there an application, it's a pretty in-depth application, right? And the reason I do that is I'm not trying to get the highest number of people to be on the How I Made It Marketing podcast. I'm trying to make the best possible episodes. Now we've gotten a lot because we're Marketing Sherpa. We've gotten like over 3,000, like 3,600 or something applications. I think we've published like 120 episodes. So, it's not an issue for us there. But the reason I did that is not to go for quantity. I wanted to go for quality. So when you think about friction, right, you're balancing the quantity and the quality. More friction, you'll tend to have higher quality leads, right? The people are going to be more motivated. Less friction, you're going to have higher quantity. And you can play with this, right? Because, as I mentioned, you can do some stuff over time. You can have 2 steps in your field. right? In your forms, right? So step one, so when you're going for quantity, reduce the number of steps in the beginning, put more of those on the second step, right? You'll get more people coming in. But let's say you need to optimize for quality, right? Your sales team is overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed. You don't have time to go through a lot of people. You can have a lot of fields on the first step and less fields on the second step, right? So here are some questions you can go through to determine how to, make your reduce friction on your forms. We have another question. I'll keep that on the screen so you can read that while we've got this other question coming in.
Right now, no questions.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. So let's talk about when we're at like the top of the hour. If you got a few more minutes to stay on, I want to talk about this last element, incentive, and then we can answer any more questions at the end. If you got to go. And I think we'll send like the follow-up of the video and the slides and stuff. All right. So the final piece is incentive, right? And if you see incentive, it's balanced against friction there. It's incentive, I minus F, incentive minus friction. And that's because that's all you're supposed to use incentive for. Just that little extra bit to overcome that. There's going to be some necessary friction in your process. You can never remove it to zero or you're not having anyone do anything. That's what incentives for, just that little extra bit. Now, the problem is, and that's why I call it the lowest level of marketing maturity. Some companies market only with incentive, right? They're just trying to essentially buy you as a customer, right? The example I love, especially before the Great Recession back in like 2008, is American car companies. And they kind of came back to this somewhat, like, we'll pay you to buy our car, right? We don't understand your motivations. We can't communicate the value of our cars, so we'll pay you to buy it. $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 cash back if you buy our car, right? Not surprisingly, that's not a high margin model. These companies went out of business. The government bailed them out, right? So that's not what you should use incentive for. And this is what kind of people do. I like to call it the bacon of marketing tactics. So like if you're not a good chef, you take bacon, you throw it on anything, it's going to make it a little better, right? Take a plain cow salad, you put bacon on, it's going to make it better. You have a horrible sales process, product that has no value proposition, just throw incentive on, you're going to get some leads, you're going to get some sales, right? You're going to kill your margins, right? This is the last thing you should do. Just that incentive is that little extra bit to overcome friction. So like when we talked about that kind of perceived value and perceived cost, right? When they're close, we're just trying to tip it a little extra. So we talk about incentive. Here's an example. This was someone that took one of our certification courses that we used to offer. And they had the idea of, it was a B2B email landing page for a specific white paper. Let's test out the most effective incentive. So take a look at this. Before I show you the answer, it was, you could either win one of 20 $25 Amazon gift cards or win one of 10 $50 Amazon gift cards. So before I show the answer, think about that. What do you think would be more effective to have on a landing page? Someone's filling it out to get the white paper. That's what they want them to do, fill out the landing page to get the white paper, but they put this little extra incentive of this thing to win on there. Because when you think about it, this obviously, right, it's the same exact cost for the company. So if we could find out if one of these worked a little better, boy, that would be really helpful. So one of 20 $25 Amazon gift cards, one of 10 $50 Amazon gift cards. I'm asking you to guess. I honestly would have no idea. So why you test it? Incentive two, one of 10 $50 gift cards, right? 31% relative increase in conversion rate. But think about that when it comes to testing your incentives. That's a huge difference, again, for the same different cost. And it's that perceived value of the incentive itself, just that little extra bit. So here are some questions to ask you to get that best incentive, right? First of all, why are you choosing to use an incentive to begin with? Are you using it for the right reasons, just overcoming that little bit of friction? Is it aligned with the motivations of your ideal customer? Is it specific to that, or is it just a general incentive? And is it aligned with the value proposition of the product or service you're ultimately intending to sell? So I've got some little cheat sheets for that overall, conversion heuristic I showed you. This is, going to be in the deck too. We've got these posted online in a link. It just kind of shows you, if you want to walk through using that, start by thinking about what can I remove, add, or change, kind of going through the different heuristic. And then lastly, on the other side, we've got questions you can ask to help with your motivation. That's what I got to say. Looks like we got some more questions, so I can stay on a little longer to answer any other questions we have.
Do you think motivation customer is pain point, comma, goals?
So, well, yeah. So understanding the customer's motivations, kind of like I was saying before, is understanding what are their pain points and what are their goals? And this is what I like to talk about when I talk about pain points. Like when we're coaching someone in the AI guild about what they've got, what they're working on is, right? So if someone has ever kind of had an injury, or let's say you've got a shot, a flu shot is a bad shot, right? Like it's on your arm and I could poke around here. It's a pain point. It's kind of sore, right? Then, ooh, when you poke right there, right the center of it, you really see them wins. And so when you're playing with those pain points, that's what you're trying to do. You're not just trying to get some general pain point that they kind of feel. You've got to hit it right dead center where they really feel that pain, where they want to act right now. To do that, you got to find a pain or a goal, I mean, it works too, that's relevant, urgent, and important, right? So relevant, it matters to that specific customer, right? It matters to your ideal customer. It's relevant to them, right? Urgent, right? This is not something that, you know, they can put off for 6 months, a year, right? Why does it matter to them now or they won't act now? And important. And important is key. We've had these conversations on how I might at marketing with different business leaders. And they would talk about sometimes the mistakes they would make is they would go to customers and they would say, if we did this feature, like, would you like this? Do you have this problem? Do you have this goal? And customers would say yes, right? Yes or no, right? However, if you give them 10 features, right? 10 problems, 10 goals, and have them rank those, then you see, well, wait a minute. Yes, is this feature helpful? Or do they have this pain point, but it's number 8, right? Well, if it's number 8, like you might get some of them, but really they're focused on 1 through 7. Or is the feature you set up in your product, your value proposition, your pain point, whatever it is it number 1 or number 2, right? You got to see how important it is. Don't just generally determine if they have it. Can't be low on the list. It's got to be high on the list. That's how you tap into a key motivation. Again, you'll see more questions right there, have on the screen, and some ideas of how you can better understand customer motivation. Any other questions?
Yes, we do. How can we transform the knowledge you are sharing into simple processes to teach our employees to see them increase their sales?
Sure. Well, since you're asking, I will mention that this is all built into MeclabsAI, which is free to try. You don't even have to register. One thing you can do is ask it to train you. You can just brainstorm with it and do these type of things. The other thing you can do, obviously, we're going to have this replay you can share. I'll include a lot of free resources so they can see it there. We've got some of the tools like you have on the screen, just kind of cheat sheets. And on Marketing Sherpa, marketingexperiments.com, meclabs.com, and we have just tons and tons of free content that goes into these different elements. We have the AI Guild, which, as I mentioned, is free to join for the first 3 months. I think after that's like $20 a month. I honestly don't even know what we've been doing about charging people for it. But you can come in every week, taking different kind of interactive coaching classes. There's a whole community that is kind of talks about this methodology that you can brainstorm with. And on January 8th at noon Eastern, we've got Get Productive with AI. You can join our CEO. He's going to talk about how to use AI to get some of these things done using this methodology. That's at meclabsai.com/getproductive. There's a lot of different resources out there. I think and assume we'll be sending some out, but you're always welcome to reach out to me, Daniel Burstein. My email address is in there, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and I can just kind of help point you in the right direction.
Daniel, if you wouldn't mind, put your contact screen back up as we go through some more
Yeah, that's a
questions
good
here.
idea.
All right. Next question. Are B2B more motivated by pain or by goal, reverse of pain?
So that's a common thought, right? In the B2B industry, I've always heard it's all driven by pain. And there's something called FUD, if you've ever heard of it, that companies use: fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and you're just trying to like kind of tap into all these pains. And definitely seen it with cybersecurity and all this stuff. And I mean, really haven't seen that. We have there's another tool we have, is kind of a free tool. It's like a thought tool where you can you're trying to break out what you know about the customer. And what you're trying to determine is what they move towards and what they move away from, right? And what they move away from, right, those are their pains. What they move towards are their goals. And that's how, again, these are human beings in B2B organizations. They're not all operating out of fear. They're trying to meet goals too. So you just really have to understand that organization and those individuals and kind of drill down and see what really drives them. But I have definitely seen that what I think is a fallacy, even in something like cybersecurity. It's not all doom and gloom and fear and doubt and everyone's scared and they're all going to get laid off and fired and their competition's beating them. sometimes it's understanding that customer and kind of going towards that. And we've got some tests too. I can, share as follow-ups where, I mean, this is something definitely we've had that we've done case studies on and people in our guild have tested. Let's test this kind of fear-based message versus this kind of goal-oriented message and see what works better.
What percentage, as a rule, should your marketing budget be?
There is no perfect percentage out there. You have to understand where your company is and what level of maturity, right? So, for example, if you're a very mature company with very established with few competitors, that's very different. Where if you're a growth oriented company, and you're really mainly trying to get market share. If you're VC funded or something like that, right? You're really trying to get market share. So it's not looking for some perfect number. It's determining, and this is kind of a business strategy that you should be looking at the beginning of the year. Where is your company in as a cycle, as a company, right? Are we willing to take some profit and margin hits to grow and to gain market share, or are we very mature and hey, we're just looking to kind of keep our market share? Those are some key things. And cash flow obviously ties into that too. So I mentioned I did a how I made it marketing with the CMO of Trust Radius recently, and she also talks about kind of some key numbers. Talk about the Rule of 40. So if you don't understand the Rule of 40, that's kind of something that's trending around now, at least for software companies. You can look that up or listen to the episode with the CMO of Trust Radius.
Is we have a few more questions, but while we're doing that, I
Please.
want to let everybody know that Daniel will be back with us on the 14th of January. That's going to be a live coaching webinar where he'll be, wanting to go ahead and have you share your thoughts on your landing pages, your advertising questions, your social media podcast, and we'll have an open interaction on that. Next question. I really need to know how to increase perceived value when, as a minority owned woman repair service, we are expected to work harder for less money.
Yeah, let me answer that in one second. But just the next session we're doing, I think it was January 14th that you mentioned.
Yes, 10 o'clock.
Something we do something we do in the AI Guild. We've done group coaching where we pull up a landing page, someone's real landing page, someone's real email, whatever thing you want to get coached on. And we give, feedback on it to help them, get kind of specific ideas to improve out. We usually also use Meclabs AI to kind of go back and forth and get that feedback. And so the goal is to help you specifically with whatever you've got. The person that submits it, obviously we can't go over everyone's, but the person that submits it, they get some specific feedback. But everyone who's watching, it's a real world example like your peers where you get some specific feedback. Okay, sorry. So back to the question. So again, right, that is that you kind of have to go through the heuristic and kind of the different questions we talked about. I have never been in those specific shoes, right? And I want to be very careful in saying that I can't know what it's like to be in those specific shoes, right? So let me start by saying that. But I will say that every company on here has a challenge, right? And that's your specific challenge, and they've got their specific challenge, and they need to understand how to communicate through that. Worked with some of the biggest companies in the world. They have the challenge too. I mean, often their challenge is they can't move quickly. So what you got to look at is what do you have in your value and your cost sides, and how can you make the best use of what you have? So I would think, just guess off the top of my head, understanding motivation, ideal customer. There are going to be customers who would see as a benefit the chance to work with a woman-owned company, right? And that is something you can use in your perceived value to them of why that's a benefit. There are some companies that it's probably not going to matter to them, and I don't know how they would know unless you told them, like on a landing page or whatever, that it is a woman minority-owned company, and you could focus on different elements of value. So there's different answers to that when it comes to morality, when it comes to politics, when it comes to all those different things that I don't feel qualified to touch on. But when it just comes onto marketing and communications, it breaks down to understanding your ideal customers and their motivations, like we talked about, and deciding who are you going to communicate that to and how are you going to message that so it matters to them, right? Is it, well, I overcame these 10 extra hurdles, or you're going to be dealing with someone who understands you better. And then who do you, not bring that up to? Not that you're trying to hide anything. It's just a matter of there's only so much you can communicate on a given landing page and a given ad. You want to focus on the things that are going to matter most to the company. So for example, I don't remember exactly what the company was, but if it's, I know like an auto repair shop, right? So an auto repair shop, I know I've definitely heard from women, they've felt uncomfortable in the way they've been talked to or treated at auto repair shops. And so if your message was to a group of women and say, hey, I'm a woman, and because of these reasons, we communicate or treat women better in auto repair shops, right? That's a group you can target. And then for another group, you would just talk about other reasons why you're a good auto repair shop. So I hope that helped.
Can we use CRM to collect and store this data? Uh, what other tools would you suggest?
Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about the form, often that's going to feed into a CRM. The other tools, I mean, they all sometimes overlap and are similar. An ESP, email service provider, or marketing automation platform. I mean, basically, you want to have some sort of tool where you can communicate. Once you're gathering that information, then you can communicate with your customers because we said there is a journey, right? So a CRM could be better for sales oriented, or if it's a very small company, there's a lot of one-to-one communication. But you also might, as you build a list and have a bigger group of potential customers to communicate with, look at kind of more the ESPMA type of side of things, where you can send newsletters or other kind of group emails of value. So then you can pair the one-on-one communication with this kind of broader communication. You can have regular conversations with your customers.
Daniel, our last question, I think, would be a great way to go ahead and finish off your presentation today, which has been truly excellent. Excellent. Question is, considering the content and tools that you offer for free, how do you use this method within your own company to convert to sales? Can you use your own company as an example?
Yeah, that's great. And the first time we present, I just realized too, there we go. There's my personal contact information. I had the wrong screen up. So there you go. Feel free to reach out, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. There's my email address. There's not a lot of Daniel Bursteins in the world. So if you search it and you spell my name right, even if you spell it wrong, you'll probably contact me. Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the questions we had, I remember the last time we did this because it was such a good question. We talked about all these free resources we have. Someone asked, why on earth do you do all this for free? How do you make any money? Right. And so, yes, it comes back to that customer first objective, right? So our customer first objective for Marketing Sherpa, for Meclabs AI, is to help you essentially be a better marketer and be a better entrepreneur, right? And so what that looks like, and so we help a lot of people who never pay us anything, right? And so what that looks like is I'm sure you've heard the analogy of the marketing funnel. And the basic idea of a marketing funnel is it's a lot wider. What a funnel is, it's a lot wider in the beginning and it's a lot narrower at the end. So you're going to get all these people in and then kind of they trickle off and come to that. And so the kind of whole idea behind our company and this way of marketing is show, don't tell, right? So I could get on this webinar for an hour, or I could use an ad, or I can use whatever, and I can say, we are really good at helping marketers and entrepreneurs use AI and use different ways to increase their leads and to sell more. And for the next hour, let me tell you why we are so amazing and great at this, right? And I would have probably lost all of you, in the first 10 minutes. Or we can say, instead of investing that money that we could invest in just ads and outreach and all of these things, investing that money there to just try to sell and say how great we are, we could say, okay, let's take that money and instead invest it in Marketing Sherpa and invest it in, offering some free versions of Meclabs AI and just helping people, right? And so then you come to your own conclusion that this is something that can be helpful for you and get to the point where, frankly, you want to work with us, right? So our CEO, Phil McLaughlin, has a great quote I always love. I use this, again, not just in marketing. Like this isn't just marketing. This is life, right? Communication and all these types of things. This is life. Perceived value, perceived cost, right? So he says, don't make claims. Let customers come to their own conclusion, right? And that's essentially everything I've showed you today is to do that. It's not just making a claim and saying how great you are. That customer first objective, right? We showed it's helping customers come to their own conclusions. And that's why I say this is more than just marketing. This is life. When I would go to do recruiting, when we were hiring, our HR department would reach out to me and say, hey, can you please help with the recruiting here? We're not good with it. I'd go to University of North Florida, University of Florida, Florida State University, these colleges, and it wouldn't do the presentation where it's like, okay, here's, the salary and benefits and this, the history and blah, blah. I would present that same conversion heuristic that I showed you, but I would present it to, here's how to figure out which employer you want to work for first, right? Which job, which place do you want to work for first? And here's how to communicate to employers that they should hire you. And we would go through it. And I would just teach for an hour. And at the end, I'd say, by the way, we're hiring, right? And people would come up to me and they're like, oh, I just saw, I don't want to pick on anyone specific. I don't know, Morgan Stanley or whatever. They came in here and they were recruiting and they said how great their 401k program was or whatever, right? But they said, but for some, I'm just attracted to this more, right? Because again, in this world where people are getting, how many ad messages are out there? People are getting all these ad messages. When there's truly a customer first objective and a company is truly out in customer first marketing to help you, that sticks out in the world, right? And so I use this analogy too. I've got kids and teenagers, young adults, and boy, if you try to make a claim to them and tell them you should do this, right? How are they going to react? They're going to do the opposite thing right away. So to just try to give them the information to make the right conclusions, and hopefully they do, and sometimes they don't. Now, getting back to our company, so that's what we do. We don't invest the money we could in just kind of sell you and ads and this and that. We invest it in helping. We invest it in MarketingSherpa. We invest it in case studies. We invest in the podcast. We invest in all these things, in the AI Guild. And then we help a lot of people, right? And then when it comes to the point of actually paying, there's a huge drop off. Probably 99% of people never pay us anything. But that 1% who we're right for, they're the ideal customer for us, we're the ideal for them. Then at a high margin level, they want to buy MeclabsAI and use it in their company, right? They want to engage us for an intensive where we work directly with the company and then help them, improve their marketing funnel, right? So that's what it all comes down to. It's that customer first objective on the front end, helping all these people, whether they buy from us or not, we're helping them all the same. And then we find out, when I look in our CRM, when I look in our ESP and there's someone that comes through and wants to work with us and hire us for an AI intensive or use MeclabsAI, sometimes I see, boy, they started 8 years ago, following us. They follow us through 3 different companies, and it wasn't relevant, urgent, important to them at the time. The timing wasn't right. But then when they came into the right place at the right time, they're like, oh yeah, these folks have helped me so much over time. If I paid them, how much more can they help me? So I hope that answers that question.
Basically, what goes around comes around. Daniel, excellent presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Look forward to seeing you again on the 14th of January. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. We hope to see you also at another SCORE event very soon. I wish you all a happy holiday and a wonderful time. Be safe, and we'll see you see you later. Thank you.
Thanks, you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Daniel. Bye-bye.